computer. Yeah. We hit record. We're live. All right, not live, but we're recording.
We're live recording.
We're live recording.
Live, are you alive? I'll be more alive.
Yeah, my first dunks in forever. I hope it's not a slippery slope down the going every day, but it is what it is. So we have our coffee. We're finally getting together. Very excited, as usual, to talk to you, Ingrid. Thank you for doing this.
Of course.
Okay, so
Thank you for doing this.
I'm thinking Ingrid needs no introduction, but for anyone who hasn't seen our other videos, tell them how amazing you are at biofield technology, biofield energy worker, remote viewer.
I am a certified biofield tuner and researcher. I am a Reiki master teacher. I am a sign language interpreter. And I am learning the art of remote viewing. I am a lifelong experiencer of both ET contact and multidimensionality.
Let's pause right there, if you don't mind, because that's enough.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, right? When we start thinking to ourselves like, oh, what did I do with my life? Or what do I have to offer? And
What do I
that's
still
just
want? What do I still want to do with my life?
right. Like these are all things that encompass your interests. They're not just lists and whatever. It really encompasses who you are, not just a job listing, which is really cool. So you just said that you're an experiencer. Tell me what experiencer means.
Well, what it means for me is that I have, for most of my life, been aware of alternate dimensions and realities, and I've been paying attention. I've been observing, and as an awareness, an observational awareness, and in the things that happen to me and the people around me and the ways that people around me react, respond, deal with, don't move into denial, pretend it isn't there. And mostly how the people around me when I was younger either chose to accept what was happening around them and talk about it, process it, and check in with other people and be okay with it, or really reject, judge and dismiss or pretend it wasn't happening to save
Are you
their own
talking
sanity.
about, all right, so on the one hand, you talked about experiencing alternate reality, and then you said the people around you were kind of dismissing it, ignoring it. Who
Well,
was around you that was
some.
also?
So the people, okay, so in my immediate biological family,
Mhm.
there was, even just as an example, of a massive comfortability and acceptance of
Mhm.
things like aliens, UFOs, dreaming, information that comes to us in dreams, discussing dreams. I grew up in a house with lots of poltergeist activity, so acknowledging that happened when it happened,
Okay.
talking about it. I mean, we used to go on family vacations to the White Mountains in New Hampshire to go UFO hunting.
Okay,
You know,
so that
some
makes a lot of sense. So when
Yeah.
people talk about their childhood and they have ET contact, they experience alternate realities, they don't usually have a family that can talk about it
Mhm.
or acknowledge it. So you had a family that was open to it, but still there were certain people in that family that would dismiss it. I mean, that's kind of, can you just, yeah, tell me more about that?
So
How many people in your family? So you'd go on vacation to New Hampshire for the week.
yeah, so I was the youngest of five and a half. I had a half sister in Europe that I haven't met physically, but I've talked to on the phone.
Okay.
Um, and as a kid, initially, I think, you know, there were sometimes two of us, sometimes three of us, sometimes four of us that were,
Mhm.
to start out with, there were four of us, and then, the three away from me aged out and then moved out. And then, like slowly, then the next one would age out and leave.
Okay.
And so there were times when it was just me and the sibling closest to me in age was a brother, that
Mhm.
we would be with my parents and going and observing things. And it was generally dark, right? So my dad, it was tinged with, an understanding and a culture that he had. And so I was aware at an early age, um, that there was that it was dark and that there was a positive and negative ET influence. And then the experiences that I had with my star family and being on craft, being with them, um,
Mhm.
and them warning me and sharing information with me about being cautious, being careful, being invisible, not talking about what I saw and knew and understood. And
Now, who
so
said this to you?
my
Your
star family,
family?
my
Your
star
star
family.
family did
Yeah,
it.
so
Okay.
the ET, so I was taken on craft when I was really little. I very vividly remember being in an environment where I was no longer here in the third dimension. And suddenly it was like, I mean, I didn't understand it as a third dimension and I didn't understand dimensional differences yet. But I was
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm not like here. I'm not in the living room or in the bedroom or in the wherever I'm at. Now I'm in an environment that feels different, that smells different, that the light quality, the vividness, and
Mhm.
I am with you know anywhere from two or three to five or six or seven or eight beings that are that
Did it
have
also feel like
shape.
home and comfortable and familiar?
Yes,
Different,
yes.
but
Yes, and it was frequently like, why do I have to go back? Why do I have to be with this? Why do I have to be with this family? Why can't I stay with you? That sort of feeling.
Mhm.
And the explanation was always just like, you know, you're safe. You chose to be here. Everything's going to be okay. You just need to kind of play the game and be present and not talk about what you know and see. You have to stay invisible. Um, and
Can I
so,
just say, a lot of people, I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, we chose to be here. You chose to be here in my QHHT hypnosis sessions and things like that. I hear a lot of people say, well, we chose to be here, and if we didn't want to be here, we wouldn't have to be here. But in my QHHT sessions, a lot of people say exactly what you are saying.
uh-huh.
Um, why do I have to be here? And they are encouraged to go back, just like the NBEs, very, very similar. Sometimes they are told to go back, like we can't change our minds. And some people are told, this is your work, this is your assignment.
Mhm.
Did you get that message at all? Like you
Um,
chose to be here and you can't change your mind.
it
Or
wasn't,
was it more like we're gonna just keep encourage you to continue on this path that
yeah,
you chose to do?
I mean, so my light family was like the feeling of being with them was
Mhm.
so loving and so accepting.
Yes.
so accepted and part of like feeling connected and feeling supported and feeling loved and light and happy and joyous. And so to hold in contrast then being with my biological family where things were a bit chaotic, things were dark, there was a lot of yelling, there was a lot of unhappiness, there was a lot of alcohol, there was a lot of poltergeist activity that didn't feel good. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel comfortable. It felt uncomfortable. And even just as a very small child, that simple comparison, like why would I not want to be back with my light family? And so it was a sort of, it was more of like I'm aware of these things. I'm aware of the differences. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I'm paying attention and I'm perceiving differences. And these differences are more preferable than these differences. But um, I'm, it was a lot of receiving information and seeing, um, oh, being aware of people's emotions, like, my mom was really depressed, feeling her depression and wanting to help her and not knowing how. Um, my dad was really angry and chaotic and controlling. And even though I loved him, and he loved me, like I didn't feel unloved, but I just felt like you don't know what you're doing. You're unconscious, you're not paying attention, or you don't care, or you don't have the experiences that I have. Why, if you would have the experiences I would have, if you knew how your being angry and being mean landed, you why would you treat the woman that you're married to that you supposedly love this way? This makes no sense. And so like from 3-4 years old, trying to put myself between my parents and like turn to my dad and bring reason, like, why are you doing this? Like,
Did it
what,
ever work?
why? um I think there were times when it gave him pause. I think that there were times when it sobered him up. Not that he was like a drunk, but um, but there was a little bit of a like, oh, uh, uh, oh, or like then
He
going
thought about
going
it.
into going into anger, right? Like you don't get to tell me you're the kid. You don't get to tell me this kind
Yeah.
of kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
there were also my parents entertained a lot, and so there were always we always had a house full of like of partying people.
Mhm.
And that led to both amazing things and really horrific things. And
Right.
um
Right.
mostly for me it was an observation and trying to be invisible, right? Because what my family of light told me about being invisible was protecting me, was protective. um but I was also 4 years old, hiding in closets, being poked and prodded and by demonic energies, having demonic energies, scary things growling in my ear,
So why did that happen
scratching.
to you
Um,
now
so,
that
so I
you
don't,
can
I
look
don't,
back?
I don't think it, I mean, I think some of it happened to my siblings as well. How they dealt with it was different than the way that I dealt with it.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if it was because I had more help in the non-physical. Um, and then as I started to get older, people coming to me in the third dimension to assist me in navigating what I was experiencing, right? Sorry, I'm gonna turn my phone off. Having, as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, um, a friend of my parents, someone who had purposefully gotten to know my parents because their psychic assignment was me. And so they met and they met my parents on purpose in order to work with me, to find me. And then my parents, being who they were and how they were, immediately invited them home to meet their kids. So, and then they came to me and said, we need you just to trust us and work with us. We're here to help you. But in order to do that, you need to come over, and we need to be alone with you. And I was like, okay. Um, yeah.
And how
So,
old were you?
oh, by that time I was older. I was 13, 14, 12,
Oh,
13, 14 years old.
okay,
Um,
and I'm assuming these were not benevolent.
no, absolutely. Absolutely saved my life.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay,
Completely saved my life. Um,
okay.
a woman, yeah, a couple, and I started going to their home a couple days a week. I did that for a few years. They would read
Now,
my
what do you mean that
leads.
that you were their assignment? Can you explain that a little bit? How does that work?
So what, her name was Eleanor. What Eleanor told me was that, so the first thing that we would do when I would get to her house is that Harold would bring us tea and she would read my tea leaves. And
Oh,
then we would just process. We would just process. She would ask me questions about my experiences, and I would honestly talk to her and feel like I don't have to hide. I don't have to hide with you. I can tell you anything and everything. And so she mostly came to me because I was having such a hard time with my family and with humans. And I was starting to get really angry with human beings. And so the way that she explained it to me was that she was a psychic, and she had been doing um helping to move on negative entities, demonic entities. She'd been doing helping the Catholic Church doing exorcisms for like 25, 30 years. She was
and was she
already
Catholic?
she didn't identify as Catholic. No, I think that
So that is really interesting.
yeah,
The Catholic, so
she would go along with Catholic priests to exorcisms to assist in the exorcisms, to assist the negative energies into moving on. And
it's a
that
little
she was,
bit wild, I have to say, that the things that I thought were true from my upbringing as Catholic are false. The things that I thought were too wild, like exorcisms, like, oh, they're just Catholics are just scaring people and whatever. And now, of course, I had my own exorcism, but like we call it, I had a big energetic release, snakes going down my legs, um, experiencing that with my shaman who saved my life, just like Eleanor saved yours. They come in at the right time, thankfully. But yeah, that's really interesting.
yeah. So, and then I mean, like I said, I would go to her home a couple times a week,
Yeah.
physically. And then we started working together almost immediately in dream time. And where,
Can
she
you
was,
explain that working together in dream time? Keeping
yeah.
it really, really like, yeah, for the people
So,
who watch this.
so, so I am someone who dreams. I receive information in my dreams. Most of my dreams are lucid, or many of them are lucid dreams
Mhm.
in which I'm conscious and aware of what's happening. I come back in the morning with absolute recall. I come
Mhm.
back in the morning with details about explanations or downloads.
Mhm.
Um, I have done that most of my life. One of the gifts from my father, my biological father, was dreaming. He started instructing me when I started, even before I was speaking English, in German, because my first language is German. Here, I grew up in the United States in New England, but we didn't speak English in the house until I was almost a teenager. And so in the mornings, I would, climb out of my crib and into my parents' bed, and we would wake up together kind of, or my mom would bring my dad coffee, and my dad would wake up, and we would immediately start sharing information about, what did you dream? And
Oh, wow.
I remember very clearly, I think I was 2 or 3, and he the first time he said to me, "What did you dream?" Or the first time I remember him saying to me, "What did you dream?" In German, and I said, "What is a dream?" And he said, "When you go to sleep, the movies that you see, the places that you go. What, what do you remember seeing? Did you see pictures? Did you, was it in color? Was it in black and white? Did you see
Wow.
horses? Did you ride on horses? And I was like, oh, I rode on horses. And he was like, okay, you rode on horses. So it was like that repeatedly and like making it up at first because I didn't really know until all of a sudden I was aware of dreaming.
Mm.
And then I would excitedly come into their bedroom and like wake up my dad and be like, this happened. This happened. I remember this happening.
And you
And
think your dad, that he was training you to do that, or he was just curious, or a little bit of both?
probably a little bit of both.
And did he want someone to share his dreams with as well, or just
We all did as a family. We did it at the breakfast table, but like we all talked about our dreams and
hmm,
right. So we all were experiencing the poltergeist activity and we all were, looking for UFOs in the sky. But I think that my dad was looking for grays and I was trying to hide and be invisible to grays.
what are grays?
Gray aliens, Zeta Reticuli,
Mhm.
the negative faction of extraterrestrials that the Nazis and the MJ-12 and the Eisenhower administration agreed to work with and sort of um, sold the souls of their people to the Greys
Wow.
to follow a Gray agenda of being manipulated and giving our power away and being hybridized because they sold us a story of we're you in the future. We just lost our emotions, complete falsity. And my light family was like, they're the bad guys. Like, no, 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 no. You need to not be taken by them. So you have to be invisible. Um,
Mm.
and yeah. So those were
My
the
understanding about the grays
Mhm.
is that there are good and bad. So
Yeah,
these, you're saying the specific grays,
the
Zeta
Zeta Reticuli.
Reticuli,
Mhm.
are the bads, and something about Eisenhower. But we won't talk about that because I want this video to stay up on
Okay.
YouTube if I can,
Okay.
if possible.
Yeah,
And keeping
there's
it
a
more of like a simple
sure, sure.
point basing.
So I was dreaming. So I
Yeah.
was so I was dreaming lucidly and
Yeah.
I was having lots of information shared to me via my light family about future events, about the sun exploding, about, past lives, about Atlantis and Lemuria, about being a mer being and living underwater, about, seeing myself as a multidimensional etheric being, um
Mhm.
uh past, present, and future, accessing different lifetimes, accessing different worlds, different experiences. And then with Eleanor, what started happening was I was going through a period of dark potentiality as a teenager. Most of my friends at school were all talking about the same dark being coming to them in dreams and being terrified. And I had seen him too. It manifested out of our closets, and there was this sense that it was trying to kill us or feed off of our life force. And it was terrifying to everybody. And
It's
so
terrifying just to hear that.
it wasn't like that wasn't just me, that was my friends. And so Eleanor started to help me know what to do when I started to encounter that in dream space. How do I respond to that? Initially, there was also like I started having at that point in my life, I was 13, 14. I had niece, I in the next couple years had nephews. I was terrified for their souls. I would frequently wake up terrified that something was horrible was going to happen to them, like the things that I had been seeing my whole life happen to other little kids. And
And
so
you are how old at this time?
13, 14.
Still 13, 14.
Yeah. This was when I started working with Eleanor. and what we
Wow.
started working on in dream time. So initially it was her instructing me how to um escape, deal with, banish, move the dark entities on and away. Initially she had me working with the energy of Jesus. And because I was raised my father was Catholic, my mother was Protestant, or at least that was the religion that they most closely associated, the religions they most closely associated with.
Yeah.
That was the framework that I had to work with. And so that's where we started. We started with that framework, and that framework was really successful. Calling on Jesus was super successful.
What did you say?
Uh,
Like,
I,
in the name of Jesus, I
no,
command you, or
no,
just
and actually just initially it was saying the name, saying
just
Jesus'
saying
name.
Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was an invocation of a specific savior. Um,
Right. A
and
specific energy, really. You're calling in
yeah,
that energy of light, kind of?
yeah. I mean, at this
Okay.
point in my life, I believe that Jesus, the being known as Jesus, is a co-opted energy. At the time that that individual was on the planet, the name in that culture, they didn't have the name, they didn't have the letter or the sound J. His name wasn't Jesus. It was Yeshua. And so even that simple thing, who is the being that was put on a cross, and the religion that symbolized the death, the crucifixion of a being that was trying to wake us up on the planet to our divinity, who said things like the God, the Father that yet that Yahweh was saying was God. Jesus was like, that's not my father. That's not
The first testament,
right. In the
Old
Old
Testament
Testament,
God. Yes.
Yeshua was responding saying, your God isn't my God, your father is not my father.
Right.
And
We were
so,
just having this conversation in one of my Telegram groups.
okay.
And, I've always been saying Jesus was a Jew, right? That was always my very limited understanding, because he was a Jew at that time. And now I'm like, wait a second, you're right. He wasn't a Jew. He was fighting that. He was fighting the Jews.
So I believe he was an ascended master. And I think that
He wasn't actually, he wasn't fighting the Jews. He was trying to add the knowledge that he had into Judaism and
yeah, and quite
escaping some
honest,
of the rules. That's what I
yes. And
feel.
honestly, I think that Judaism was corrupted, right? I think that the original Jewish people and the philosophies and the belief systems
Yeah.
are one thing that got really co-opted and taken over by an ET race that have done this worldwide over and over and over again um to distort our to distort and hold us back from
Mhm.
waking up to who we truly are. So
Mhm.
so Eleanor initially tried using that symbology for me to walk into more sovereignty and to be able to know and tap into my own DNA, my own lineage, my own knowing, my own empowerment, so that I could work with love, so that I could work with light, so that I could work with my star family from a more empowered place. Because at that point, I was so angry. I was so angry and disgusted with human beings that I was starting to want to work with any ET species that wanted to wipe out humanity. I was just like, they're not worth it. They're really not worth it. They're give up. Let's just go home and
And were you
let us
lonely as
self-destruct.
well?
Was I lonely? I don't know that I felt lonely. I think there were moments within my family that I felt lonely,
Well, that's what I mean is
my
like
biological
when we
family.
feel those things, like I
But
can't imagine being 13 years old, having
Mhm.
all of this happen in your friend group, your family group, and having all of this and not feel really isolated and lonely. And isn't that when we're attracted to
Yeah, but so by that point in my life, so much else had already happened to me
real
where
world, real life trauma
real,
type thing?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
that there was a part of me that was really embracing being damaged goods, right? That I had been so tainted by that point and upset and angry. And like I didn't I mean, I always felt the energies of other dimensions. And I didn't feel alone in that sense because I felt like I was connected to multidimensional beings. It was humans that I had trouble with. It was the third dimension that I had problems with, but at least in the third dimension and among humans, like there were animals that I could connect with. There were, insects that I could connect with. There was nature that I could connect with that made me feel less alone, that made me feel like, okay, here are sovereign, good beings
yeah,
that
yeah.
are also just trying to survive humans. Because there's so much corrupted and co-opted and distortion
Mm.
that I don't know how to navigate. I was at a place where I was like, I didn't know how to navigate it anymore without being awful, without turning to the dark, without turning off my heart, without
Yeah.
um just being mean to get people away to protect myself.
And
Um,
because you have all that anger inside of you, like that was
yeah,
my entity that I
yeah,
had. That when
yeah,
I say an entity removal, an exorcism, it was a huge pile of betrayal and anger. It was
yeah,
red hot.
yeah,
Like, what do you do with that? This is what you do with it. You
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I grew up in the 70s and there was just
yeah.
lots of alcohol everywhere and irresponsible
Lack of
adults.
supervision and big families and no supervision at big family events. Oh, trust me. Yeah, girl, I got you.
Yes, and constantly taking your life into like, well, oh well, here, let's just,
Yeah, and
speed,
there are other
speed drunk.
things about there are things that I go, oh, the old days were so good. I could ride my banana seat bike and my dog down to play tennis, and it all felt really wonderful. But that, like, the flip side is no one was supervising you when you needed it either, really. And my parents, they were great parents. They were just 70s parents. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
were you aware of stuff too? Like were you
no,
tapping in
your
or
story fascinates me. I was in a box, the Matrix box, and never felt comfortable. And it's an understatement to say I never felt comfortable. I grew up just always having anxiety, being uncomfortable, not understanding everything. And then when I was a senior in high school, almost not graduating and having a panic attack in class. And my parents brought me to the cardiologist instead of like, oh, you're probably really, like, um, so I always knew that I was different, but it felt damaged. Like you said, you were feeling like damaged goods or whatever, like I don't belong here. And now I look back and I understand why that happened. And that has just opened up a whole new world for me, that I can be open to these conversations because I had to experience it first before I would believe it.
Mhm.
Um, and now, like, even making these videos and talking to you and all of that, like, I hear my parts of my family going, I told you she always been crazy, you know? Um, but this is a very recent thing. So thanks to you coming to the Wednesday groups and I mean, just knowing you and your circle and all of that, it's really opened my eyes to so much more that I'm getting the crash course. I'm
Yeah,
getting the crash course.
you were
Yeah.
protected. You were protected. Yeah. I mean, I remember
What do you
being,
mean by that? I was like, you weren't
well,
protected, but you think I was? Like, how does, tell
no,
me.
I mean, first of all, I think that there are no mistakes in the sense that I think we all choose the lives that we live. We choose the
Mhm.
parents, we choose from potential trajectories, right? There's no guarantees, but it's more likely that this is going to happen than this. These are the dynamics. These are the potentialities, right? You know, if you fall into fear, then you're going to be drawing more negative stuff to you. If you
Yeah.
can stay in love, then you're going to be drawing more positive stuff to you, or you're going to be able to ride that out differently. I think that is true for all of us.
Mhm.
But there's something about the way that, like, you know, when I was a kid, I was abused and by multiple people. And later on, as in the times that I chose to put that to the back of my mind to be able to function.
Yeah.
And then in my 20s, finally being in an environment where it was safe for that information to come out.
Mhm.
The healing that was able to happen at that point, but then also interacting with people and going to groups of people who had similar histories or had traumatic experiences growing up, and talking about, like, that, that when they remembered that they had been abused, and I was like, you didn't know? And they were like, no, I blanked out. And I was always just like, that didn't make any sense to me. I was like,
I
how can
didn't blank
not?
out. I just didn't think it was abuse. It was so normal.
So I
I was like,
never.
oh, okay, this is kind of what people do. This is kind of, oh, well, it happened to me. Oh, I'm damaged goods. I made a mistake. Like I always,
Interesting.
it,
But you didn't forget.
yeah,
Me neither.
it lived in my body. Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't
And
forget. Yeah.
and I remember the whole thing.
Yeah.
There weren't any parts of those abuse experiences that
Mhm.
I forgot. I chose to put them to the back of my mind, but
Okay.
I can still talk through them like they just happened. I haven't forgotten that. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the healing that I did was trying to release it from my body.
Yeah.
Um, but not because I was trying to recover memories.
Yeah.
I'm only now starting to think, what do I not remember? In the groups that I'm in now, is
Mhm.
there a possibility that there are, like, because of the things that I remember and the way that I remember them,
Mhm.
what is it that I don't remember that happened before that? I'm
And do you
curious.
need to? Like at this point, I'm like, do I really need to? Like, I just keep clearing and clearing. Like, do I want it?
Yeah, no,
You know,
I
valid.
no, yes and no. There is a
Mm,
sense that, um, do I need to spend a lot of time and energy digging? No.
no,
Would I like to easily retrieve information that would be more helpful to me now? Yes. Because
right.
throughout my life, the experiences I had were so varied in terms of psychic phenomena
Mhm.
and alternate reality phenomena, that it was just kind of like random stuff my entire life, repeated throughout my entire life. I mean, like, having teenage parties in the basement, and, poltergeist stuff happening and all of my friends seeing it and then kind of freaking out and turning it off. Or having experiences where, like, my life was saved one time and kind of seeing people getting mind wiped right after it happened and freaking out that they were getting mind wiped because I knew what was happening to them, and I
Mhm.
knew that they weren't going to remember it. And I was so desperate to have them remember it that I kept talking about it, and I kept talking about it and insisting that they remember and begging them to remember. And so now at this point in time, they all are just like, I know something happened because I remember you talking to me. And I know, like, I remember something weird, but then I can't remember what it is, but I remember you constantly talking to me to try to get me to remember. And I remember what you said, and that being true
Hmm.
throughout my life. Or just even like being like 5, and having that, or 4 or 5 years old and playing with, the Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down.
Yep, yep, I remember.
And the
Yep.
people at the people airport, and playing with that, and like I was always sort of like talking to my spirit family, and my star family, my light family, and the phone would ring, and I would announce, I would say who's calling before anybody would answer. Um,
Mm.
it's dad for business, or it's so and so calling, or it's the neighbor, or it's whatever. And then, right around 10 or 11, my mom being in the backyard with me and her saying, I don't, you are not like my other children. I don't,
You're
I
like, Mom,
don't
no shit.
I don't know where you come from. I don't know where you come from, but you are
Yeah.
not like my other children. You have been here before. I don't doubt that you're from the stars. I don't doubt that. Because from the time that I was like, 4 and 5, I would point up at the Pleiades and I would say, that's where I'm from.
Mhm.
That's where I lived before. Um, that was just always very much of a thread. But with Eleanor, going back, kind of all these tangents, sorry, but with Eleanor and the dreaming, it started that way and then it became more complex. Been having flying dreams my whole life, spent years and years perfecting control of my my speed, my elevation, the
So,
dive.
all right, the next time we talk,
Uh-huh.
can we please talk about astral travel, lucid dreaming, remote viewing, remote
Sure, we could talk about that
influencing?
now.
Well, I want to put it on another, we'll stop this one and we can start another one.
Okay.
Um, because this, I like having your history, and we can start like a series. I put on my little note thing, the Ingrid Nevar series, because
Sure.
there's no way. I mean, you just have so much to share, so much to say, but there are lots of different threads,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I'm definitely a communicator, and I have had so many experiences throughout my life. I would say that what was challenging for me was being a part of the third dimension and interacting with humans in a way that they all interacted with one another. I was always just sort of observing, not understanding. Like I was like, I don't get you all. I just don't get you. And I have to say that is still true of me, where
yes.
I'm a bit socially awkward because there are a lot of things that I just don't get.
No, I don't
I,
understand
I
certain
don't
things
understand
either.
why
Like,
why do you do this? Why
I
what
never understood when people were lying or like trying to say things in a nice way that's very polite. I wouldn't get those signals at
oh,
all. And I still don't sometimes, because
interesting.
I'm like, just, and I was also very bold and would just say that, like, I don't know. I could also be cunning and manipulative too
Mm,
afterwards, but I don't think that that was my base personality here. Like, I learned those things from the anger and the entity, if you will. I also want to talk about entities and the entity. I'm writing these down too. Entity removals and what
uh-huh.
um Eleanor taught you about that, and how that differs now. That's a whole new thread. So
Sure.
Ingrid's history and the dreaming and all of that stuff, and then entity removal. That's another on a different Telegram thread. They're talking about entity removals, and some people are like, well, if you're just not afraid, then they won't get you. And I'm like, okay, so if we could do that
That
ourselves,
that took a lot. That took, I mean,
yeah, it's not
I don't,
just anything.
yeah, I don't feel, I mean, I feel like even though Eleanor taught me what she taught me, the stuff that I saw was so dark. It was
Yeah.
so dark and so horrific that it took me until I was probably like 40, 40 in my, right around 40. And
Yeah.
I'm
Long
55.
time.
I'm 55, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
until my 40s, between 40 and 45, to actually conquer, transmute, my fear of demonics and my fear of being scared of the dark, being terrified that, if I looked, I might see something.
What
That
if
it
you go to sleep and dream even? Like, how did that affect somebody's sleep cycle if they're having
it was,
terrible nightmares?
yeah, no, mostly my dreams were always, it was like an escape. It was where I was safe. It was where I could do anything. It was where I couldn't die. It was where
Okay, so it's the opposite
I could
for you. Some
fly.
people have this in the dream.
Yeah, not because I wasn't dealing with demonics in my dream, but the superpowers that I have access to in
Mhm.
my dream state,
Yeah,
it's always been like I'm a warrior and I'm here to fight the dark,
yeah.
right? But for a long time there was like I need to first not become the dark.
Right.
And
Okay,
so yeah,
that makes sense. So I've got notes here. So Ingrid Nevar series, like your history, like how you came
yeah,
to all of what you know now. Like that's amazing to me and will be amazing to other people. Then the lucid dreams, astro travel, some people, is it dangerous? Is it not dangerous? Like all of the truths, according to Ingrid, what you have as a truth right now. And then entity
yeah,
removals and
yeah.
what you've learned. So let's get back together
Okay,
and do this because I just
okay.
love it and I'm grateful. So
Enough
thank
for
you so much.
today. You're so
I
welcome.
think I think enough for today. Like that's a lot
Okay.
to think about. For you, it's another day.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I could talk for 4 more hours, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, that's our cue. You hear that?
no.
Oh, the fire truck just went by. All right. Thank you, Ingrid.
You're so welcome.